Okay, welcome back, folks. This is, episode 75?
75.
That's crazy. I should be lucky enough to live that long or longer. So this is also going to sound a little bit different. Hopefully our sound quality is going to turn out okay. We're using our fantastic Rode microphone. We were going to use microphones, but couldn't get the magic combination on GarageBand.
Well, we're always using our microphones, but we're in person with each other.
Yes, that's the big deal. It's like we're in person, which is crazy.
We're together. We don't know what to do. Do we look at each other?
Was it January?
Don't look at me in the eyes.
No eye contact.
It's been well over a year.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
So episode 75, we're in person. Mostly because you're going out of town.
Yeah.
And we had to make it work tonight.
Yeah. So we may have to utilize the amazing, handsome, and talented Jason Usry to do some sound sweetening on this or something. But hopefully we'll be okay.
Let's see how it goes.
Anyway, we're back together. This is the first time we've been back in the same room recording, even though we've hung out a couple of times safely. And yeah, it's kind of weird, but it's good to be back. You're looking at me weird.
No. Sorry. This is all very surreal. Okay, people are tired of hearing us talk about that weirdness.
Yeah.
But we're also coming up. October will be 4 years that we've been doing this.
I don't know where plus I don't know where the last year has gone, period.
True.
But that's crazy. Because you know what, we were getting interviewed. We were getting interviewed recently, and I got it wrong. You had to correct me because I was like, "Oh yeah, I think we're going on 2 years, or 3." You're like, "No,
2017." This is great. So we're thinking up a couple of different events for in person for folks. We are considering a Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios.
Right.
We have reached out to our OG paranormal friends at Hollyweird Paranormal to see perhaps we can do a meetup at Universal City Walk at a bar, and then we're going to get tickets and we're going to go into the park. And anybody that wants to come on down the same night.
Yeah.
Anybody
wants to hang with us, it's great. Bring your Advil and a change of shoes.
Oh my God. Comfortable shoes. Because standing in line is no joke.
It was a lot of standing in line. It was different from Disney. It was a lot of standing in line.
We'll get VIP tickets this time, and then there's like a fast pass lane.
Okay. So we'll do that then.
We're going to go big. So we will let you know as soon as we solidify that, as long as it's still safe to do so. I saw right now that there's alert that LA cases are back up to the levels they were in February for COVID. So let's see how that goes. But still on for Savannah Crime Festival or Crime Expo in September.
Yes.
And we'll see what else. Maybe it's time for another watch party at least.
Yeah, watch party and maybe another sort of outdoor venue that we can find and have drinks at or something.
Yeah. We should do Bonnie and Clyde for a watch party.
Oh, that would be good. Yeah. So,
cool.
What's different about this week, Dr. Shiloh?
Aside from everything we gushed about at the beginning, you mean our topic?
Our topic, yes.
Okay, so we are going to be covering the Skidrow slasher, and along with that, looking at this fallacy of satanic murder, satanic serial murder. And what I want to do is really start with the case study, which is different than normal, and then get into some of the concepts so we can kind of go back and apply them. We're going to talk about a couple things that we covered really in the Night Stalker episode. We talked a lot about Skidrow with that, and that obviously plays a role in this one, as well as Satanism and or devil worship. Those get interchanged very loosely, and we'll talk about why when people see something odd at a crime scene, they automatically jump to that. And you talked about it quite a bit in that episode we did on the Night Stalker because of his supposed affiliations with it. Right,
with the Church of Satan. And we won't go too far down that road again, because if you want to, please go back and listen to that episode. Also look in some of the show notes that we've updated because we got corrected. I had my information wrong about the factions within the Church of Satan, which was wonderful to be corrected in that way. By the way, some of the Satanists I've talked to, nicest people in the world.
Absolutely.
And love the fact that we were corrected on these criminal usage and adoption of this ideology that is very different from what they purport it to be. And then we're going to go a little bit further into vampirism.
Right.
We haven't talked about it.
No.
We've gotten actually a number of people asking about this, and we wanted to find really the right sort of context to put it in. And of course, I say this every time. I sound like a metronome, not a metronome, a broken clock.
A broken record.
A broken record. Oh my God, I can't even get my metaphors right. It's not even that late in the day. What am I doing? What we do is find out that there's actually been some research on vampirism, and it got initiated by sort of a fluke. And it circles back around to our OG psychologist, criminologist, Catherine Ramsland.
Ooh, she makes another appearance.
She does. She makes it. Ties it all together really beautifully.
Nice.
So,
well, I can't wait to hear about that. And that's really going to be the deeper dive portion of this, rather than regurgitating what we already did on Church of Satan. Although I'm going to talk a bit more about the fallacy part. So, let's start with the Skidrow slasher. This again, very Los Angeles centric. We are happy to talk about it because it was several decades ago now. But this individual, the perpetrator, his name is Vaughn Greenwood, and he was responsible for a number of very similar ritualistic crimes here in Los Angeles and actually in Chicago. And it spanned about 10 years from 1964 to 1975. He was 20 years old at the time of his first murders. He was originally from the Midwest. There's not a lot of information on his background, but he was given up by his parents at the age of 5 and then put into the foster care system at that point. Ended up dropping out of school in the 7th grade when he's around 12 years old, and eventually makes his way out to the West Coast. So he earned a living by being a migrant worker, doing a lot of field work. He's a black man, he's a gay man, and this is going to come into play when we talk about victimology and some other underlying possible psychological concepts going on with Vaughn. So let's start with the murder spree. On November 13th, 1964. Greenwood kills David Russell, who's a 64-year-old homeless man who, in the morning time, was found on the steps of the L.A. Central Public Library. Gorgeous building down here in L.A., very Art Deco. Basically, a security guard comes to work in the morning and finds him. Actually, as part of my job, I work with the current team who are the security guards there. And so I just picture these people that I know and that I do some consultation work with and train. If they were to, schlep into work and show up one morning and here is this body on the steps, throat slashed, stab wounds throughout the abdomen, and it's just jarring. It's very jarring. So a day later, there's another murder in the same jurisdiction. It's not the same exact location, but Benjamin Hornberg, who is 67 years old, was found dead, much in a similar way, throat slash as well as stab wounds, and he was actually inside a seedy downtown hotel where he lived.
Okay.
And we are going to hear more about this, including some of the hotels that the infamous hotels that we did along our walking tour.
Yeah.
So those two happen back-to-back days in 1964. They're unsolved at the time. The police don't know what happened, obviously know that they're related by the similar MO, but nothing really happens in LA for a good while again. The following year, 1965, Vaughn Greenwood actually travels back to the Midwest, and he pops up in Chicago where he was tried and acquitted for a murder of a homeless man that lived in kind of a Skidrow area, and he was killed in the same exact way. So Is there a Skid Row area in Chicago?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I know you weren't there in 1965.
No,
but
I mean, like any large city is going to have it. I mean, it would depend. I mean, I don't know if there was a place that we called Skid Row, but there were lower income, less monitored, less moneyed areas.
Okay.
Around
a lot of
the city.
homeless.
What are we like? I'm just noticing the first two are. Their ages are significant to me. Do we see that continually throughout his victims?
Don't, but the next victim is 70 years old. So this is also in the Chicago area. After Von Greenwood gets tried and acquitted for the first murder in Chicago, he then basically gets convicted for attacking a 70-year-old man who was also homeless with a knife. And there were some reports that they might have been romantically involved or linked, or he had brought him home with him, even though they said he was homeless. Some people had apartments for the night or for the week. So there were some rumors of that. So I don't know if the ages are indicative of him finding people who are weaker, who are more vulnerable, or if there's something happening with looking towards, if this started as some sort of romantic partnership at all.
Well, you don't have to be coy about saying romantic. Like it would be a hookup.
Well, a sexual relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
But also these victims, is anything else missing? Is money being taken? Are they robbed as well? Do we know?
We don't know with the earlier ones.
Okay.
It's going to play a part when he comes back to California.
It already makes me wonder, like, how many victims he had before anybody figured out he was doing this, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And something else that comes up is, when we talk about a sexual relationship happening is there wasn't any – I'm going to say there was no indication of any evidence of any sexual assault either, but I don't know that they would have been looking for that. Because if you're thinking, okay, violent killings.
That's a great point.
It's probably a male perpetrator. They're probably not thinking, oh, should we check this male victim for sexual assault?
That's a really great point, especially this far back in time. Why would they even look for it until it's super explicit?
Right. And however, I did not see anything with the couple of survivors that we have. I didn't read anything that they had talked about an attempted sexual assault. So he is convicted for this stabbing of this 70-year-old man in Chicago. He spends 5.5 years in prison in Chicago and then comes back to California. And we know that he's back in California by October of 1974 because the murders really pick up here in exactly the same way and 9 murders in a very short amount of time. And when I say in the exact same way, the very first victim that is killed is found on the lawn of the LA Public Central Library. So here we have Greenwood continuing his murder spree in December of 1974 and going right back to the same place as his first victim in 1964, and the same thing. Charles Jackson was the victim, his throat was slashed, and that's where he was found at the library lawn. Not even a week later, Moses Yakinak, who is an Alaska Native American, he was found in an area around Skid Row, also homeless. This was on Broadway Street. He was killed in the same exact way. 2 days later, on December 10th, Arthur Dahlstedt was found in an alley down in Skid Row. He is now the third victim in less than 2 weeks, killed in the same way. And then at the end of December 22nd, we have David Perez, who was killed near the library. He was found in some bushes off to the side, not as out in the open as the other two, either on the stairs or on the lawn. But he also had his throat slashed and was stabbed. On January 9th, Kazimierz Straczynski was found by a maid at his hotel. It was the Pickwick Hotel, and he had been murdered inside his hotel room. That hotel no longer exists here in LA. I think there's one in San Francisco. He was the first one in January, and then the second one on January 17th was Robert Shanahan, and he was found in the McDonald Apartment Hotels, which also doesn't exist anymore. and his throat was slashed. He had stab wounds, and he had a bayonet sticking out of his chest.
Oh, my gosh.
So we're talking violent and above and beyond, again, what it needs to complete the crime or the MO. There's definitely signature here happening with the multiple stab wounds and the throat slashings. I mean, the throat slashings were so gruesome that it was down to the individual's spine on most of these.
Wow, that's brutal.
It's really brutal. The seventh victim was Samuel Suarez. This was also in January, and he was found on the 5th floor at the Barclay Hotel. So I think this is one of the individuals that we heard about from our tour guide that was killed back in the 70s and was found in the very violent and very haunted, supposedly, Barclay Hotel. Supposedly there's a headless bellhop that rides the elevators because he lost his life there in a tragic accident. And then we have January 29th, George Frias. He was a hotel catering clerk, and the difference here, he's killed the same way, but he's actually found dead in his Hollywood apartment. So we have 7 all in and around Skid Row, and then all of a sudden there's this change to Hollywood. Anything that links Skid Row and Hollywood? I mean, pretty big homeless populations for Los Angeles.
But even at that time?
In the mid-70s?
I don't know. Yeah. I'm not familiar with what was going on. I mean, well, no, I think 70s probably, because that's really when certainly Hollywood Boulevard was really doing a deep.
I mean, we had a lot of serial killers at that time,
absolutely
too.
Did. Hard to track
Angeles.
them. Welcome to L.A.
So most guesses are that, he was just picking on this population and decided to change locations for whatever reason. And then on January 31st, the final murdered victim, Clyde Hayes, was also found in his Hollywood home. And he, again, was killed with stab wounds to the abdomen as well as his throat being slashed. So we have 7 that were found near Skid Row, 2 that were actually in their homes or in their apartments in Hollywood. And this is where we start to see that he is breaking into the homes and stealing some items, because this comes into his capture and prosecution later. But they still don't know who this guy is. There is a psychological profile that comes out in 1975. I'm going to talk about this before I talk about the last attack. And this gets published on the morning of Clyde Hayes' murder. So he was the last person murdered. The psychological profile described the killer as a, quote, sexually impotent coward, venting his own feeling of worthlessness on hapless derelicts and drifters he kills. And we think he's trying to resolve his own inner conflicts by turning his wrath and hatred outward, end quote. So they went on to describe him as also friendless, poorly educated, a loner, probably homosexual, which is interesting because I don't know where they're getting that if there's no indication of sexual assaults. And they said he has an unspecified physical deformity. So this sounds very like early behavioral analysis unit prototype for what they used to say. And they also said
bullshit.
They also said you're looking for a white man in his 20s.
Right, of course. There's
in his 20s or 30s.
There's a lot of assumptions there. Then again, we don't, this is reading reports 50 years later, almost 50 years later, and not knowing where they're getting all this stuff. So, I mean, I have a couple of things to say about it, but let's talk about about Clyde first.
So, actually, we're gonna move on from the victim Clyde, and I want to talk about this attack that happens in February of 1975. So there are 2 men that are attacked in their Hollywood Hills home. They are attacked with a hatchet and a knife by Vaughn Greenwood, and they both survive. They fight with this guy like hell, so much so that one of them is fighting with Vaughn, and they go through a window and fall out of the house, out onto the ground outside. And as he's fleeing, he drops an envelope that has his name and his address on it.
Wow.
So it was totally by luck, really, at this point, that he ends up getting arrested at his home later. But interesting story here. So there's this Hollywood home where he attacks these men. Burt Reynolds lives one house down from them. I have a relative that lived one house down from Burt Reynolds. Actually, she still lives there, and she's lived there, and was friends with Burt and Lonnie Anderson when they lived there.
Oh, my gosh.
So she was there during this time. But Burt relays this really intriguing account of this night on the Dinah Shore show. So he says that actually he was out with Dinah the night of this attack, and he's like, I come home, it's like, 3 a.m. or something, and I never locked my doors. I go in, I kind of plop down on my couch, and all of a sudden I see my neighbor crawling across my floor holding his guts in. So he's like, there wasn't a version of 911, but like I go to call the cops, and I see this man standing outside my window, and he's wearing my poncho that Clint Eastwood gave me from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and a cowboy hat. So he was in Burt Reynolds' home.
Trying on clothes.
Essentially he thought waiting for him, and then he was out so late, like whether he knew it was Burt Reynolds' place or not when he broke in. But he was waiting and then put on his clothes, left, and went and attacked his neighbors. So Burt actually has to testify in the trial of this attack. And he says that they asked him at trial, do you remember what he looked like? They had him point out in the courtroom, of course. And then they say, can you remember what he looked like? And he goes, yeah. And these are his words. He looked like O.J. Simpson.
Oh,
he had
man.
a huge neck and had obviously been lifting weights. And I just thought, oh my God, that quote is crazy. But basically, the Skidrow slasher looks at Burt Reynolds through the window and just slowly walks away. And then at some point, drops the envelope. The cops find him. But Burt Reynolds' account is when he was in the courtroom. The defense attorney gets up there and is like, well, isn't it true, sir, that you're an actor? and Burt goes, well, the jury's still out on that. And the judge turns to him and goes, this is not the Tonight Show. Just answer the question.
But that's a really good comeback.
Isn't it the best?
That's a really good, also you provided a link. We should put it up.
I will.
When we drop the episode, there's a link to a YouTube clip of the Dinah Shore show.
Yeah.
Which is the way, if anybody watches BBC, like the Graham Norton show, that's the way American talk shows used to be, where these people just went on. Most of them were drunk by the time they got on.
Totally.
They're totally, now it's just all promoting your movie or whatever you've got opening up.
It was
But
great.
Back then, it was just like celebrities jabbering. Which
Right.
Really funny.
Yeah, because he's like, oh, yeah, the guy, Skidrow slasher, he killed like 23 people. And no, he didn't. But, he's making it very salacious.
Well, it's
awful.
It's pretty bad.
That was traumatic, of course. He said that, he testifies in court, and then as he walks out, Vaughn Greenwood is smiling at him, and he looks down on his notepad where Vaughn Greenwood was writing, and it says, must kill Burt Reynolds, must kill Burt Reynolds.
No.
Yeah, that's what he says.
Whoa. Wait, does he say that on the interview?
Yes.
I did not remember that part. Okay, we got to see if we can get some verification of that.
Yeah.
But still.
Wow. So I need to ask my elderly, father-in-law's cousin who still lives there if she remembers all this.
Yeah, seriously.
I'm sure she totally does. So Vaughn Greenwood gets picked up. At his home, they find cufflinks and some other things stolen from other victims' homes and or their person. And as he is taken into custody for that, the media is kind of trying to put two and two together. Like, is this the same guy? And is he wanted for these other crimes? And clearly the cops were looking into it. I think there was a gag order where they really couldn't talk about it. They didn't want to jeopardize the investigation or the serious, the investigation of the serious serial murder. But eventually they do convict him of 9 counts of murder, as well as the attacks on the 2 men.
So for the 2 men, you said Clyde and his roommate?
No, Clyde was the last one killed. These 2 guys were separate. These guys survived.
Oh, okay. They were a couple.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So that does kind of beg a question. Like, did they go down to Santa Monica Boulevard, where at that time was very, very sex work heavy,
right.
Male sex work heavy, and pick him up? Or I mean, I don't know. I mean, it would be
I don't
interesting
know.
for further research.
Yeah, another account, and I don't recall where this is from, but was talking about, because this is Miller. What is it? Miller Street, Miller Avenue. That's right off of Sunset.
Yeah.
Right there. I only know that because that's where my relative lives, but also, a place very common for drugs as well. And so was he like going into Hollywood Hills to try and steal stuff to then go get drugs? Like that was also a theory of being there and sort of this opportunistic crimes.
Right. He could have been talking to some other drug user who says, oh, yeah, there's a bunch of celebrities that live up here.
Yeah.
Burt Reynolds is right up the hill.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Go get Clint Eastwood's poncho and bring it back for some drugs. So it all gets put together. In total, we have 11 victims in Los Angeles, the 2 in 1964, and then the 9 in 1974, 75. All of the victims were male. And so here is a bit about the crime scene, because I told you what the injuries were, but we have also the fact that there was really evidence of some weird stuff going on. There were cups of blood found by most of the bodies with some indication that the perpetrator had been drinking the blood, as well as salt scattered around the bodies. And then all of their shoes were taken off and pointing towards the victim's head. As well as it never said anything exact, but unusual markings or mutilations to the bodies. So markings, it said cryptic on some of the references that I had. So I don't know if it was like messages written or in blood, or just weird and unusual mutilations,
right,
along with the other stab wounds. This is what people, caused some people to believe the murders were linked to Satanism or some sort of devil worship.
That's really interesting stuff as well. I mean, in my limited knowledge of what evidence we have, there's not a lot indicating what kind of occult practice that would be. If it's anything, salt is often used in many occult religions as protection. But then why would he circle the body with salt to keep it protected unless he thought it was a sacrifice?
Right.
The shoes are very, very important in both hoodoo and voodoo, but you don't kill people in hoodoo and voodoo. That's not what... I mean, you might use it to harm someone or to cause ill towards someone, but you don't kill somebody in order to make that happen. So
it sounds like there could be sort of these components like pulled out of the air from a couple different places. Right, but I would also say that it could also be pulled out of watching a 1975 ABC TV movie. Totally. So I'm not saying that this person had any background in the occult. We don't know that. And what I do, those things of the way he is described, at sort of slowly looking at people and then walking away slowly, really gives me a sense of this guy is psychotic. Yeah. There's a psychosis acting on him that's driving him to do these things. Right. Good. Let's put a pin in that. So generally, serial murders that have some component that may look like Satan worship or sacrifice are not related to Satanism or the Church of Satan. So what we have here, and let's go by what's observable, what's recorded and documented, we have ritualistic behavior of some sort. Yes. And ritualistic behavior is a customary repeated act or a series of actions. So we can see this in various cultures as a part of religion, as a part of tradition. For example, having a turkey on Thanksgiving is a ritual. Why do we do that? Because we think the Pilgrims and the Indians had a nice turkey big dinner. And then we pull the guts out, just like Burt Reynolds' neighbor. I wonder if he survived. Jesus. Yeah, they survived. Oh, good. They did. Yeah, they both testified at the trial, too. But in crime, it can be seen as a behavior either before or after the crime that is repeated and unique over a series of crimes. So that's when we kind of see ritualistic behavior. Okay. When it's not Thanksgiving, when we do see it in crime, it's before or after, usually, that it comes to our attention. And there's a variety of mental health disorders that can have associated behaviors that might appear ritualistic, but
exactly,
it's not because of some otherworldly
occult belief system or religious system. It could be that they are being compelled by auditory command hallucinations, which is very common. It's not common, as we have said many times, it is not common for severely mentally ill people to act out in violence. It is very, very rare. But I think that you've given us like a perfect example of an extremely rare, out of the ordinary outlier perpetrator who has these factors engaged in their mental health process.
Right. So it, like you said, it could be command hallucinations. It could be some sort of false belief that is driving them to this behavior. And one that is linked very close with this, and I can't remember the guy's name, but up in the Sacramento area, the guy that thought his blood was turning to dust.
Yes.
And was killing and drinking other people's blood. So, I mean, perfect example of a false belief of why he's doing this. You know, even obsessive compulsive disorder, people are compelled to do ritualistic behaviors. We don't necessarily see that come into play in crimes.
Right.
But
and
it's a way in which ritualistic behavior comes out in people.
Yes, but that's a very interesting comparison or example you give, because in that type of diagnoses, it's almost always centered on orderliness, and the compulsions are about an orderedness unless it's switched over into hoarding. So there are different domains, but like, when have we ever heard of an OCD killer?
Right.
You know?
Right. I'm sure there's a episode on the
CSI.
IT channel called but all of this to say that a series of crimes can be ritualistic, but it does not mean it's satanic.
Right.
People just like to jump to that. I mean, I've seen a lot of researchers talk about this, and they agree that motivation's important, but if a crime scene had a bunch of crucifixes present, would we call it a Christian crime? You know, I mean, why? Like, why are we taking symbols and making these leaps? But since the beginning of time, we have had atrocities committed in the name of organized religion, and the victim is usually targeted because of their differences to the perpetrator and their religion or their belief system. And that's not what we have happening here. It's also been suggested that a true satanic murder would be rationally planned and motivated by the need to fulfill a prescribed satanic ritual. And the researchers in this area say you'd be really hard-pressed to find a murder that fits that definition.
Yeah.
Like, if we're going to work backwards and say, here's a definition, okay, show me the crime, it doesn't exist.
I know that there's an example in Europe that's only maybe less than 10 years old of a ritualistic death metal band that had, engaged in a sacrifice that was somewhat organized and planned, but they are nowhere near any of what we would consider the Church of Satan.
Nobody's claiming them.
It's like, we don't do that. It's always these outliers that come across as very sociopathic and narcissistic at the same time, a good narcopath.
Yeah. There's usually other factors and motivations present if you have something that looks like this, such as, we've already said, severe and untreated mental illness, maybe anger fueled by a grievance. Or
a perceived grievance,
perceived,
right?
That's a great, let's definitely say that.
What did Burt Reynolds do to him? He's just like scribbling on his notepad, is like, kill Smokey, kill Smokey.
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Maybe it was his singing in Best Little Whorehouse in Texas.
I you know what, I can understand that anger. That was bad.
It was.
God love Dolly, though.
I know. And here we are, we're going to get into your section in a moment, but the drinking of blood can really fulfill any number of motives or needs other than devil worship. So we can have the false belief system, a bizarre false belief. It could even be a paraphilia. So
right. I did want to tie this together in a very weird way, as I usually do. And I wanted to say about, in the Catholic Church, the process of priest converts wine to Christ's blood, and we don't blink an eye about like, oh, this is, I was not Catholic. I was raised Methodist, but I was always like, oh, this represents. And then I had a Catholic friend go, No, you have to understand in the Catholic belief system, it becomes Christ's blood.
And we all line up to drink it.
And we line up to drink it, which was never kind of part of the Protestant ideology that I understood, but maybe I was too young to understand it. And then as much as it's easy for us to gloss over the idea of Christian-oriented crimes, we actually do have many Christian-oriented crimes that usually are on the fringe of established religions. And the most recent one, of course, is Lori Vallow.
Right.
Lori Vallow, clearly mentally ill in some way or fashion, narcissistic, thinks that she's a cult leader, thinks that she's anointed by God.
The end of the world is
coming.
coming.
The end of the world is coming, and it's okay for her to dispatch her biological children in the way she did. So, yeah, all we have to do is hold the conversation open a little bit more, and suddenly these examples start bubbling up, which I think is fascinating. So, yeah, that is a great beginning. I think I want to just kind of file away the whole idea of it having anything to do with Satanism.
Yep.
We covered that in an earlier episode like we talked about, and it's just not relevant here. But again, because we tend to do this in this country is we just want to slap a label on it, and there's not a lot of room for people to have alternative beliefs. We do it to people that aren't Judeo-Christian, marginalized people. And another example is the West Memphis 3, because one of the alleged perpetrators had one book on Wicca, which is a nature religion.
Right.
One book they completely framed that these 3 boys were engaged in satanic killings.
Yeah, because it's a nice little explanation that wraps it all up, just like Amanda Knox.
Yeah.
A satanic sex cult, right? I mean, it has to be that.
Yes, she was a witch that was a part of the cabal of witches that had been in that village for hundreds of years. How did that police officer keep his job?
She's just an exchange student. Come on. So, suffice to say, people are into blood for many reasons.
For many reasons, right. I mean, that was a deep dive that I took, which was very, very interesting. And I got sent in a couple of different areas. So, for somebody who engages in a vampiric crime, so then the only reason we're connecting these two, because it's so interesting, is that there were cups of blood. So it's very easy for that sort of salacious, sexy term to be used and attached to describing murders. Because at one point, the son of Sam was called vampire killer, but it's just an easy term. And I wanted to explain a little bit more about that. Is there really an actual diagnosis for someone who thinks they're a vampire, or they exhibit behaviors that we would culturally align with vampire actions or behaviors? And the answer is yes and no. So yes, there are actual DSM diagnoses that this sort of behavior or belief system would fall under. Would be on the extreme ends of the spectrum. It could be delusional, and there's certainly some historical accounts of people who thought that they were vampires. But then there's also very much a growing understanding of a subculture within our community that is vampire culture, and they have further subdivisions within them. And for one very big part of it is a paraphilia, and paraphilia is described as
an unusual sexual interest or attraction. There are several paraphilias that are illegal, and that the very definition of the illegal ones is because it does not involve consent.
Right.
So is this Twilight's fault for making these spin-off groups of people that believe or want to be vampires?
No, in fact, and I'm a huge fan of vampire fiction as well, but I think Twilight, I don't even, to be honest, God love Stephanie for making all the money that she made. I mean, that's great, but it's sort of that's not a vampire. That's not a vampire. That's one of the things that Dan and I were quit changing the rules. Just quit changing the rules.
Well, what's interesting is that, kind of talking about paraphilia, that type of, we've probably talked about this before, but how paranormal porn, especially fan fiction type and written paranormal porn, is so enticing to women, because you have, generally the hot, sexy vampire is the guy that lives forever. He never ages. He's going to take care of you because he's rich and he's got a castle. It falls into line with a lot of the emotional things that women want But then also it's sexy time too.
Well, yeah. I mean, somebody pointed out how creepy it was that Edwin in Twilight, or Edward, sorry, don't come after me. I called him the wrong name because I know there are huge fans out there, but that he's like 250 years old and she's a teenager. So they're that age difference. Like
that is a bit of an age
pretty
difference.
Creepy.
That's illegal in California.
There are several legit researchers in this area, including Idaho State University professor of social work D.J. Williams and Dr. Emery Williams from Glyndŵr University in Wales. And there was this term that Richard Knoll, who is a well-known psychologist, very well-known, well-respected psychologist, and he sort of jokingly came up with this term called Renfield syndrome to describe people that had these desires. And Renfield is a classic character from the story Dracula. He becomes Dracula's thrall. Basically, Dracula bit him once, I guess enough to make him his slave, and now Renfield has gone insane and eats bugs and flies and keeps talking about the little bits of life. And of course, his goal is he begs Dracula to turn him into a full vampire.
And how do you know his storyline so well?
I know his storyline because at the Huntsville Community Ballet, when I was in high school and on scholarship there, I played Renfield in Lloyd Tygett's ballet version of Dracula, which was actually pretty good. It was actually really cool. I should see if there's tape of that from anywhere.
Earlier this week, Scott clued me into this, and I was like, what? There's other characters in Dracula other than Dracula?
I know. Oh, yeah. There's tons of them, really. So he thought that this would be like this sort of desperate, needy, groveling, but not supernatural. This person who's gone insane would be, a term to use. But he meant it as a joke. And unfortunately, in 2010, his joke was picked up by another set of researchers. And they published it in their paper on hemomania, which is really sort of a manic desire for blood. And then but they noted that it wasn't really a DSM diagnosis. It was made up. Mm-hmm. But by then, it was already out of bag because people weren't reading that it was a made up diagnosis, and then it just gains traction.
We are really creating a list of these situations
right?
where it's Stockholm Syndrome and Munchausen. I mean, it's really interesting.
Right. So there's a term called vampirism or clinical vampirism that got sort of folded into Renfield syndrome, and those are actually two different things. In 2010, over 50,000 people have been identified as being addicted to drinking blood, and they've appeared in psychiatric literature since 1892.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's going back really far, even to like literally one of our big Bibles of psychology, mm-hmm. which is by Richard von Krafft-Ebing, which was Psychopathia Sexualis. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And many medical publications concerning clinical vampirism can be found in the literature in forensic psychiatry. They feel that it's part of an aspect of many of violent crimes, but these are going back really far too. And of course, if you go back to the 1800s, you're looking at things that were really recorded as the most heinous of crimes as compared to other criminal acts.
Isn't there a phenomenon they see this in malnourished populations, sometimes with pregnant women who they're not getting the proper nutrients their body needs, and so then they have these sort of irrational cravings?
Well, that's called pica.
Okay.
And I was fascinated by that because that's actually something that happens. It used to happen in the South all the time.
Right.
Because in certain rural communities around the world, women would start getting cravings to
mm-hmm.
eat dirt or clay.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it was because their bodies were missing a mineral.
Right.
And they were picking up on like that, just I can smell that. There's something in that I need to eat. So, but that's for a nutritional deficit to be filled.
Well, I'm wondering if the same thing with iron and blood. Did you see any of that?
Well, that's where they're putting research, but there's no connection. What is really fascinating about it is that all those people that they've identified in a study of 950 self-identified sanguinists, people who ingest blood. This was between 2006 and 2014. They reported historically stronger history of medical problems, including asthma, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and endocrine system disorders, much more significantly than the general population. So maybe there is something to that, but I can't find any actual medical data where they're able to find something in the blood work or something in the hormonal system that is pulling them towards this.
Interesting.
So Renfield syndrome, going back, Richard Knoll is the psychologist. He was a graduate student when he was creating, tongue-in-cheek a diagnosis that would use this term, and it just went out of control. But he even went so far as to say that there's criteria. So he's just like pulling stuff out of his ass, right? So he said that the individuals with this syndrome are primarily male, which actually, with the known data, does seem to dovetail with that, and that they believe that the blood has a mystical quality as if it can enhance their lives. And so then he went even further and even kind of dug himself into a ditch further with this sort of diagnostic protocol, and he generated or posited a number of very specific stages. And again, the problem is he's pulling all of this just out of thin air, and he's saying stage 1 is like a prepubescent event where the child gets excited in a really sexual way by some event that involves blood injury or the ingestion of blood. We do have a legit version of that. Like, that's where the majority of foot fetishes and shoe fetishes come from.
I was going to say, that's paraphilia.
Absolutely.
Like 101.
Absolutely. So the guy clearly, as a grad student,
he's pulling from some stuff.
Right.
That's legit.
Then he says during puberty that the initial excitement becomes enmeshed with these sexual fantasies, and that typically the individual with this development of Renfield syndrome will begin by experimenting with what they call auto-vampirism, meaning they drink their own blood first and then they move on to other living creatures. So engaging in this activity then develops some compulsive components. So then he's positing that you're going to start seeing the individual with an irresistible urge, particularly one that goes against their wishes. Like, I don't want to have this desire. And I think that's where his play time kind of falls flat.
Chain me to the bed tonight so I don't go out and drink someone's blood.
But Knoll and his companion, they didn't take it seriously. And he even says in an interview later that he was contacted by a documentary company, and he told him, wait, it's just a joke. But by this time, really, the cat was out of the bag. In the Journal of the History of Neurosciences, Regis Ulrey and Dwayne Haynes published an article, Renfield Syndrome, a psychiatric illness drawn from Bram Stoker's Dracula. So, and then they didn't give it full credence, but then it was just already gone. So actual clinical vampirism has more definitive criteria in that it's a delusional notion that an individual is a vampire and therefore needs blood. And this arises from an erotic attraction to blood and the idea that it conveys certain powers. And it develops through fantasies involving sexual excitement, but they want to make the stipulation that it did not develop through the exposure to media portrayals of vampires, which I think is a really interesting carve out there.
I love that they say that explicitly.
Right.
That no, this is not because of that.
It came from something else. And then, I mean, there seems to be like they're making a definition of the media portrayal of vampires is what gives more life and substantial support of the goth culture, which there's really an overlap between elements of goth culture and sort of the vampire lifestyle, as it were, like dressing it all in black or, even going so far as to like having prosthetic fangs and hanging out with others that share that vampire lifestyle.
So they're saying that the actual criteria is a combination of an actual delusional notion that they believe they are a vampire, as well as the sexual paraphilia component.
Right. There's a great article that will be posted in our show notes also that was from about 2011, where in the Atlantic, where the male author had identified a male vampire who was a bookstore owner and was sort of keeping low profile, but he worked in the vampire community. And he had said, I'd like to interview you and I'll let you drink my blood. And then he describes the whole process is actually incredibly hygienic. Like there's a sterilized, like an individual knife that he has in order to make the incision, and everything's sterilized. And he has paperwork for the article writer, the author, to sign that says we're consenting. This is an adult consenting thing. And ultimately at that time, the author who was willing to engage in it was not able to because the vampire has motor problems where he was not able to hold the knife steadily.
God.
So, well, I mean...
That's not the guy you want.
It's really not. And they were going to wait for someone. They were going to wait for his partner, his female partner, to come home. And she, who also engaged in the activity, was going to do the cutting. And the author kind of says tongue-in-cheek, goes, our sharing of this blood was not done in by some mystical challenges, but rather that his partner missed the A train and couldn't get here in time.
So it didn't end up happening?
It did not end up happening. So we have the vampire lifestyle, which is a term for contemporary subculture of people largely within the goth subculture. And they may consume the blood of others as a quote-unquote pastime that represents social or sexually intimate connections. And this subculture is thought to have emerged mainly from the recent history of popular culture related to cult symbolism, horror movies, and I strongly believe basically it's been reinvigorated in the genre because of Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire. So, I mean, I remember being like just into my teens when Interview with the Vampire came out, or maybe even a little younger, and it was like what everybody was grabbing it at school. Like everybody's like, what is this? And like they're having sex and they're like beautiful and they live forever and they have all these powers and they're tortured.
So it's a perfect timing really for a generation coming of age.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then, of course, there's a whole series of books. And Anne Rice is a wonderful, wonderful author. And she asks a lot of questions, actually, that I think are fascinating in regards to sort of the philosophy of life when you have eternal life. Like she asks a lot of questions. What gives your life meaning when you have all these powers? You're immortal. And they give examples in the later books of people who have lived, thousands of years and they're going insane because they've done everything. They've killed millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, they didn't have Netflix yet, so.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
I mean, you could watch all of Netflix.
Right. Speaking of which, there's also a series now called A History of Witches, which was based on a pretty decent novel. It's about a witch and a vampire getting it on.
Oh.
And it's exactly that thing. It's like this romantic, dark vampire who tames his powers, tells her, don't run. If the wind touches your hair, I'll have to attack you.
Oh, God.
It's very, very funny. And, of course, I'm watching all the episodes.
I'm sure you
Very funny.
That's what you're going to do on your vacation.
Yeah, sure. So they even drilled the terms down further. Active vampirism within these subcultures includes both blood-related vampirism, commonly regarded using the Latin terms sanguine vampirism, so blood vampirism, and that entails the ingestion of the substance. And then there's also psychic vampirism, which is supposedly feeding on the person's energy. And you can be mentored by a person to learn how to go into big gatherings of people and basically just suck the life out of them.
Ooh, I know some people like that.
Right. So, but these are defined, both of these categories are defined as two types of individuals who cannot adequately sustain their own physical, mental, or spiritual well-being without the taking of blood or vital life force energy from other sources.
Okay.
So look, I mean, I get it. Like the vampire that was being interviewed, like he explained it and he said that he needs it, like that it's something that sustains him, and it's not a lot. It's like a couple of teaspoons a few times a week, as well as having the regular meals and stuff.
So is that guy delusional?
I don't know. I was wondering if it was some kind of conversion disorder. Like, I mean, we talk about Morgellons and, these other disorders. For years, we poo-pooed and said that absolutely doesn't exist. And then now there are researchers coming forward going like, oh, Epstein-Barr is actually kind of a thing. Yeah. And, oh, no, there actually is a very tiny amount of people in the world that do have Morgellons and overproduction of collagen in their system that causes these things to emerge from their skin. So,
True.
I just think we need more research. So an even further drilling down into the term is hematomania, which is the craving to drink blood. So that's when we get really into a mental health disorder as opposed to a paraphilia or a chosen outlet for sexual intimacy and behaviors. Right. So there's a compulsive element to it. Individuals with this compulsion describe it as an intense thirst-like sensation. They assert that their hematomania is an addiction with withdrawal-like symptoms, and they can substitute animal blood sometimes, but they assert that they by far preference of fresh human blood. So the frequency and the amount of the intake can vary, but for many, a few teaspoons, even just once a week, is enough. So, but once again, you have to have your regular diet. So you have a teaspoon for breakfast, a teaspoon for lunch, and then a sensible dinner.
I can't even remember to take my vitamins.
Did I have my blood today? Did I have my True Blood? True Blood was a fun series.
I loved True Blood.
I just love that they exploded. That was awesome.
I know. Did I ever finish True Blood? I don't think I finished it.
You got to finish it. It's got a it wraps up some of the storylines really well.
Do you think they have like their little like pill container that says Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and like it has their blood, like their teaspoons of blood, so they know?
Well, it's not fresh if you're doing that. You have to get it fresh.
So, and this is their own, or?
No, it's got it from others. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
So
find a partner. Yeah. Find a partner that you guys can drink each other's blood.
So, not surprisingly at all, there is a higher count of research participants who live in New Orleans. It's a very private community of sanguinists. A researcher, Dr. Browning, has found his way into this community and gotten a lot of trust, so he's able to get more information. But it's very interesting, and he used a really great point using the widespread discrimination against individuals who prefer BDSM practice as their outlet for sexual connection. He uses that as a reference point, and he says that vampires' fears to come out are far from unwarranted, and because it's a lot like kink, because we really only removed kink from the DSM recently. Vampirism highlights how ill-prepared our systems are to deal with non-conventional lifestyles and deviance, which also is something that with a lot of humor and clever writing, that's what True Blood did as a series.
Absolutely.
So there's our sanguinists. Wanted to talk about that. We wanted to touch just as another tenuous connection is David Richard Berkowitz, portrayed fantastically. I'm blanking on the actor's name. Can you look him up?
Yeah.
Because that actor that played him on Mindhunters was fantastic. He was in prosthetics and a great wig, looked just like Berkowitz, but there was so much great about what they did in his portrayal of that character that was fantastic. But the actual guy, not such a nice guy. He's known as the son of Sam and the 44 caliber killer. He's an American serial killer who pleaded guilty to 8 shootings that began in New York City on July 29th, 1976. So his first victim was 18-year-old Donna Lauria. It was first thought to be a gang-style killing, but police became really concerned after 2 more murders and several attacks. As the attacks added up, the crimes were tied together by the same weapon. It was a 44 caliber pistol. Now, in April of 1977, a young couple, Alexander Esau and Valentina Siriani, were shot to death. And Berkowitz left a note at the scene of that crime that claimed he had been ordered to carry out the murders by his father, named Sam, and his father was a vampire. So that's what the note says. Mm-hmm. On July 31st, 1977, so really only a couple of weeks later, he claimed his 6th and final victim, 20-year-old Stacy Moskowitz, and he attacked her while she was with her boyfriend, Bobby Violante. Bobby survived his injuries. Unfortunately, Stacy did not. And when he was finally taken into custody, he admitted to all 6 murders and the other shootings. He claimed that he had been ordered to kill by his neighbor, Sam Carr, who passed messages through his demon dog. So I think there was even like a hole in the wall. Like he had punched a hole in the wall of his bedroom, and he said that the demon dog, spoke to him through that hole. So lot of very creative, interesting stuff that Berkowitz is asserting. multiple mental health professional psychiatrists included all debate as to whether or not he was psychotic with a diagnosis of schizophrenia paranoid type. And like I said, Mindhunters definitely lean towards the possibility that Berkowitz was feigning mental illness.
Right.
They have a moment where they're asking, and you can see a change in Berkowitz's face where he's like clearly, kind of implying I'm making all this shit up to get better housing.
Right. And in the Sons of Sam documentary, there's later interviews with him where, clearly he can carry on conversation. I mean, there's an argument to be made that if he's in prison, he's likely medicated and can carry on conversations with the interviewer and answer that. And they don't talk about the mental health stuff necessarily, but the differences between someone who is clearly coming up with these bizarre delusions and hallucinations to then what we see later, there's a big difference. Now, whether he was feigning or whether he's medicated.
Well, he changed the story, too. So he... Yeah. So, like, even the note, everything he was claiming, that sort of implies that there is a significant factor of mental illness occurring. But then he later just completely dropped it all, and he said it was all a hoax, and he was just pissed off and sexually frustrated at women, and he was just going to, take it out on women. Which sounds like another recent crime and another topic that we've talked about.
Right, and a more probably accurate description or grievance. But then, of course, there's the theory that it was multiple people.
There is. There was a theory that was supported by the mother of his last victim that Berkowitz, along with his neighbor's two sons, were actually involved in a cult called the Disciples of Hell.
Right.
And that the killings were part of an occult ritual. So Berkowitz will neither confirm nor deny that story, but he has become a born-again Christian and has his own ministry in the church, on the web, via the prison, which is odd to me how you can do that. And it is weird that the two alleged accomplices died under mysterious circumstances.
Certainly.
However, I would say 70s, 80s New York, a lot of people died under mysterious circumstances. So there is that.
The documentary, it kind of lost me, I think, as a lot of people thought along the way as it got a little bit more outlandish. But if you want to just see New York in the 70s and just the characters that people were, just watch the first episode. That's all you need.
Yeah.
So Oliver Cooper is the actor that played him.
Yeah, he did a really, really great job. One of the things, too, just to always remember about serial killers, generally speaking, they like to generate their own publicity.
Yeah.
So this is something that would have guaranteed him some pretty specific publicity. Circling back to the early history of when people started noticing this kind of behavior, and remember, we're springing all of this off the fact that our main case study today had gone to the trouble of putting the blood in the cups for whatever that meant to him. We have sort of taken that as a lead to jump into vampirism. So back in the mid-1880s, a German neurologist named Richard von Krafft-Ebing wrote of this presentation of several attacks that involved the ingestion of human blood or flesh. And he asserted that those acts were compulsive and that they were aimed at a victim in a way that suggested lust. So he described in this book, Psychopathia Sexualis, an example where a 24-year-old winemaker had lured a 12-year-old girl into the woods, murdered her, and then when he caught, he admitted that he also drank her blood, mutilated her genitals, tore out and ate part of her heart, and then buried her remains, which at the time, mid-1880s, that would have almost certainly supported like a werewolf theory as well. Like that would have been to tear a body apart like that. Some
supernatural attributing it to
that because you can't imagine that a person, a normal person would do that. It would have to be something supernatural. Mm-hmm. Of course, Ebing is trying to present like, no, there are people that are mentally ill and driven to do these things. A number of murderers have performed like what seem to be vampiristic rituals on their victims. Serial killers Peter Kürten, Richard Trenton Chase, both called vampires in the tabloids after they admitted to drinking the blood of the people they murdered. And then in 1932, there was a case in Stockholm, murder, unsolved, where they nicknamed the killer the vampire murderer because of the circumstances of the victim's death. Then even going back farther into the 16th century, we have a story that's always fascinating to me, and there's been several movies about this, and Lore did a great episode on their podcast. But there's also a lot of research that's been done about Elizabeth Bathory. And she was particularly infamous in later centuries because she basically was a Hungarian heiress and living in her castle, just running the thing, running it as if she was a psychopath. And she was murdering servants and then became convinced that she became younger when the blood spilled on her. So she was murdering all of these girls from the villages.
What?
Then suddenly the village was like, we're not sending any more of our girls up to the castle.
No.
So she started sending out to other kingdoms and duchies across Europe, like, oh, please send your young women. And then they would like disappear. And she also tortured them really horrifically as well. So admittedly, real vampirism is still just at the beginning stages in research. And while we're waiting for academics to catch up, there are people inside the community that wanted to commission their own study. And those are the ones that came forward, gave all this data, and what we were able to pull from the data is that they had the people who engage in this behavior and feel compelled to do it do have significant chronic medical issues. I really love that Dr. Ramsland wants to kind of toss out those terms and replace it with one called vampire personality disorder, which is kind of more specific to the criminal sphere in ways. She includes clinical vampires as well as killers compelled by bloodlust and people who exploit the vampire image to act out fantasy scenarios in a way that harms others. And that is particularly where the criminal element comes in, like where we have these really sort of hardcore goth teenagers that end up murdering their significant other's parents. And there's a number of those. And they always want to adopt either this identity of being a vampire or an identity of being a sorcerer or a devil worshiper or something like that. But I love that she ends her article in Psychology Today by saying, she's talking about vampire personality disorder. She goes, shouldn't this get some more traction? I love that she's like, I'm making up a term, and I want this to catch on.
Yeah.
And she says, but so far, no prestigious journal or diagnostic manual has taken vampire personality disorder seriously. Maybe I should think of a better name. Perhaps Mina's disorder or Edward Cullen condition. How about Lestat's lament, Dracula's disease? I'll keep working on that. Renfield's syndrome is already staked out, but I welcome all other suggestions.
That's hilarious.
I love that. Now, all things being said, though, that like there really have been some horrific murders throughout history. Countess Bathory is a great example. We find out later that a lot of historians have come back and said that may have been exaggerated because her family actually wanted to get the castle and the land back.
Oh,
and
that's how you do that?
Yeah, but now it's so far back in history, like, how do we know?
Right.
Did they paint all these stories of her as being a horrific murderess for financial gain? We don't know. What we do know is that Rod Farrell in 1996 murdered his friend's parents, and he had started or was part of a vampire clan that actually his mom brought him into because she was into a vampire role-playing game. So they kind of took LARPing into real life in a really dangerous way, and he brutally, brutally murdered his girlfriend's parents.
So to me, that sounds like he's committing this brutal murder for whatever reason, but also happens to be in this vampire clan. It's not as if they're really entangled in one another.
Right, but it's also, I think that there's a shared delusion, like how much of what he picked up from his parents did he really believe? But he was described as being charismatic, and he did convince two teenage girls that, like, yes, I'm actually a 500-year-old vampire, and I can bring you over and make you immortal. And then another one, Danielle and Manuela Ruda, they described themselves as lifestyle goth Satanist vampires, and they decided to murder 33-year-old Frank Hagen, and they both stabbed him 66 times. And they were disappointed that they didn't turn into real vampires when they committed the crime. They thought that they would do that.
Oh.
But then they came up with the defense in the court. They compared their trial to blaming a car for a vehicular collision. Manuela testified that their actions were the execution of an order. Satan ordered us to do it. We had to comply. It was not something bad. It simply had to be. We wanted to make sure that the victim suffered well.
It's very Slender Man.
Yeah. So who knows if there's like a dramatic element for her where she wants to be seen in a certain way, but that sounds like a folie à deux, like we've spoken about in previous episodes.
Right.
So I find it fascinating. There's been a couple of really great examples. I mean, there's tons of great vampire movies, but when we come to movies about people that think that they're vampires, there's a great black comedy with Nicolas Cage, Vampire's Kiss, which I highly recommend watching because it's really one of his absolutely batshit crazy performances, and it's hilarious.
One of them.
And then BBC came out with a production a couple of years ago that was a retelling of the Dracula story that's really fascinating. It has all the horror and supernatural elements that you would want, and there's also a psychological and philosophical view on why he exists. And I don't want to give it away because I think it's a fascinating story. But basically, I'll tell you that like Dracula is a vampire, but he's delusional.
Oh.
So
very interesting.
Highly recommend it.
Well, so going back to whether it's Vaughn Greenwood, Son of Sam, The Night Stalker, what we really have here are ritualistic behaviors with some sort of calling card, or perhaps the perpetrator wanted it to look as if Satanism is involved, or whatever their own definition of what Satanism or devil worship is, or what that should look like, rather than we never find that they are really attached to any of these organized occult groups.
Right. I mean, it's also not, it's really reading these articles that humanizes people that engage in this behavior. You start to think like how unfair it is that they're engaging in behaviors that are between consenting adults. It's not my kink.
Right.
You know, certainly not my kink. But it would be as if somebody becomes the hotel maid killer and they use all implements that hotel maids. And it's like, this killer has to be a hotel maid because they know how to tuck that sheet really well. You know, like suddenly it's making hotel maids look dangerous.
Right. Well, and it's also the idea of how can we further label killers so that we feel like, so they're less and less relatable, or they're less and less human.
Oh, that's a great point.
Like, how can we buffer them and keep them labeled and put on the shelf with this label in this jar, so it doesn't feel as real or as scary? It's the monster.
You can make them the monster, and you can that way you can say, well, I'm not that.
Right.
And whoever is chasing after them can say, well, I'm not that. I mean, it's very interesting because that's what they did to Amanda Knox, right? They wanted to make her the other. They wanted to make her this witch. And ironically, it kind of circles around to Amanda in the last part of her documentary saying, I am you, because I was a victim. Like, it can have... You know, it's an ironic twist of metaphor is like, this can happen to you. You can be labeled this way.
Right. You can label the monster to say, not me, or not in my town, or if you're the police detective of this small, you know, I can't possibly keep my town safe from this paranormal, demonic
this succubus,
influence.
This you know,
have
evil
to be
spirit.
Otherworldly.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
That was fun.
Thanks.
It's almost like a Halloween episode.
I
but
know.
We'll have to plan something. We got to do a Halloween episode and get Al on. Al went and is out of town. And if you guys remember a couple of years ago, my friend Al, who is an expert, really seriously an expert on The Exorcist. It's like he's just a real fan of the movie, and he works in entertainment. He is working on Hocus Pocus 2, so I'm very jealous. He's going to work on Hocus Pocus 2.
He's worked on some cool, scary movies, too.
He sure has.
I really want to look more into this unsolved Stockholm vampire murder.
Well, let's do it. Why don't we do a whole Nordic crime? You love Nordic stuff, so why don't we do an episode about your favorite ones?
We will put that on the list.
Okay.
Cool. Good to see you in person.
It's really good to see you. I wonder if people are going to have any comment on if there's a different vibe going on from us being back in the same room.
I don't know. know.
That'd be kind of cool. If you're out, when you're out there listening, if anybody's out there listening,
Anybody?
Let us know what you think. This is really cool for us to be back here together, and if you notice something different.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll see you next time on LA
Not so
Confidential.
Bye, folks.
Good night. We sincerely thank you for spending some time with us today. LA Not So Confidential is part of the Crawlspace Media Network, and each episode is hosted, produced, and edited by Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh.
Our music, entitled Cool Vibes Film Noir, is utilized under a Creative Commons Attribution license. Cool Vibes is composed and performed by the amazing Kevin MacLeod, who graciously allows us to use this great piece of music. Please check out his YouTube channel at handle 1HMNC.
All of the resources for each episode can be found on our website at www.la-not-so-confidential.com. You can find us on Instagram at LA Not So Podcast, on Twitter at LA Not So Pod, and on Facebook at LA Not So Confidential.
Please hit subscribe so you never miss a new episode. Lastly, we'd be honored if you joined our Patreon at patreon.com/LA Not So Podcast, so you can be the first notified about upcoming live events, social gatherings, and super cool swag coming your way.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.